Power on.
Do you see what is happening here, Mr. Worf?
Sir?
This is not unlike a drumhead trial.
I do not understand.
500 years ago, military officers would upend a drum on the battlefield. They'd sit at it and dispense summary justice. Decisions were quick, punishments severe, appeals denied. Those who came to a drumhead were doomed. I'm deeply concerned about what is happening here. It began when we apprehended a spy, a man who admitted his guilt and who will answer for his crime. But the hunt didn't end there. Another man, Mr. Simon Tarses, was brought to trial, and it was a trial, no matter what others choose to call it. A trial based on insinuation and innuendo. Nothing substantive offered against Mr. Tarses, much less proven. You know, there are some words I've known since I was a schoolboy. With the first link, the chain is forged. The first speech censured, the first thought forbidden, the first freedom denied, chains us all irrevocably. Those words were uttered by Judge Aaron Satie as wisdom and warning. First time any man's freedom is trodden on, we're all damaged. I fear that today...
How dare you! I will expose you for what you are. I brought down bigger men than you, Picard.
I believed her. I helped her. I did not see what she was.
Mr. Worf, villains who twirl their mustaches are easy to spot. Those who clothe themselves in good deeds are well camouflaged. But she, or someone like her, will always be with us, waiting for the right climate in which to flourish, spreading fear in the name of righteousness. Vigilance, Mr. Worf. That is the price we have to continually pay.
Accessing historical database. Year 2020. The tech giants become aware of the greatest threat to their corporatist domination. An obscure science and tech podcast becomes a major factor in a peaceful open source revolt against the military Silicon Valley industrial complex. The podcast, Sovryn Tech. Its host, Dr. Brian Sovryn. The tech giants tried to stop Sovryn Tech. They can't.
Woo! The best in the world is here, and if you don't take my word for it, you could take Ellen Stallone's. Woo! Unfortunately, Ellen won't be joining us this week. I've got so much great response from having her on the show. She was actually, we did, holy hell, it was over 2 hours. And some of what we're going to talk about in this episode will actually dovetail nicely off of that Q&A. But we did an over 2 hour Q&A taking Sovryn Tech listener questions and just running right through them. And I mean, what a conversation for the ages. It really was. In fact, I might even, some of that, not all of it, but some of it I might release publicly just because it was such an incredible conversation. And I've always told you that I never ever want to put the really important stuff behind a paywall. Okay, so, but of course, if you do want to go behind the paywall, you just go to Zomia1.com, ZOMIA1ONE.com. You can go right on the right-hand side, and there's options there. You can get behind that paywall for as little as, a couple bucks, I think. And you get access to thousands of hours of audio content, as well as all new content that comes out every single week. You know, I look at some other people's like Patreon, and this isn't Patreon if you're worried about Patreon. Believe me, I am too. But I've looked at other people's, other creators, if you want to call them that, their Patreon, what they offer to patrons, what they offer. But if you'll indulge me for a second, I guarantee you get far more, especially since if you just put down and say you just signed up for a month for a couple bucks, you get access to all that content that I've been producing for years. Bonus content and original content, all kinds of great stuff. Only available in the Zomia 1 Underground. You could just pay for it for 1 month and you could listen to it, download all of it. Hell, go crazy if that's how you really want it to go. Okay, but I guarantee you I offer more to patrons, to supporters, to Underground members than, well, I'm going to call it, frankly, probably any other, certainly with what you can get right now, more than any other podcast I've seen. I mean, no one else even frankly comes close. Thank you for indulging me on that bit of boasting, and I recognize that it's boasting, but that's what the man of tomorrow does. I boast a lot, but I deliver. God damn it. So you are here for a little Sovereign Tech. Like I said, we'll have Ellen on again very soon, I assure you, because we have subjects to follow up on from last time that she was on a couple episodes ago, as well as all kinds of new stuff, including stuff that she found where she was just, she's reading and go, oh, holy shit, we got to tell everybody about this. And yeah, we will get to that. But, something we're going to get into this episode and something that Ellen and I both enjoyed. We'll get to this during the climax. But Star Trek Picard aired, the first episode anyway, aired this week. I know some people who play nice, and we might talk about this a little bit later on as well, but some people who basically suck the cock of, it's an uncensored show, folks, but that's why you love it. Some people who suck the dick, shall we say, of CBS that were able to see the first 3 episodes of the season. I mean, we'll talk about it, but, and we have all kinds of tech news to get into, including some some very disturbing things about Bezos, or that happened to Bezos. But, you really can't. I mean, I'm going to review Picard, and I do another show every once in a while called Sovryn Trek, where I just cover Star Trek news. Here's the thing. You can watch, one episode, like a pilot episode. Really, this has always been true of TV, where you watch a pilot episode and the series could end up being very, very different. I mean, again, this has been this way for a very long time. I think, like MacGyver. Okay. MacGyver is a show where that was very much the case, right? Or even Knight Rider, for both of those. And I'm talking about the original Knight Rider and the original MacGyver. Fuck whatever new horseshit came out. But in both of their pilot episodes, you have where the characters use guns. Throughout the rest of the series of both of those shows, it would basically, especially for MacGyver more so than Michael Knight, but it would be anathema for them to use a gun. And in fact, MacGyver would be very anti-gun. So, I mean, and there's other little things of that, like with MacGyver, actually the actor who played Pete, who would later play the main character of Pete, kind of MacGyver's boss, he would actually play a completely different character in the first episode. So you get my point, is that pilots aren't a great way to gauge a show, okay? Now, today, I mean, I don't think, it's to the point, really, where I don't think you can gauge a show until, like, a season's done. And we'll talk more about that later, but I will give you my preliminary opinion even though you heard a little bit of it from Ellen and I during this week's Zombie 1 Underground Q&A. Again, you want to get access to that, go to zombie1.com and sign up. But I'll give you some initial thoughts, because there's certainly a lot to say about it. And we'll see what else we can work out, who else we can get in on this conversation. Speaking of getting people in on the conversation, that's actually something I want to open up with here. And this is some exciting news for me. So there was a time back when, well, we've always been principled on this show, and we call bullshit on all of the tech giants on this show. And something we really call bullshit a lot on is social media. But there was a time, a few years ago, where there was a group on Facebook that was dedicated to Sovryn Tech. I created it because, I never wanted a Facebook group, because I've known Facebook's been a problem for a very, very long time. In fact, it turns out Facebook's been a problem for Jeff Bezos too, and we'll get into that. But there was eventually, going to events and everything. I had so many people asking me, please make a Sovryn Tech Facebook group. We want a Sovryn Tech Facebook group. Now, without getting into what I consider to be, because a lot of those events were more like events around, personal freedom, liberty, and privacy events and all of this, without getting into the bit of hypocrisy that Facebook stands in contrast, stark contrast, to all of those concepts: personal freedom, liberty, privacy. They don't support any of that crap. I don't care how many times they want to use the word privacy at their F8 event or whatever. They are full of shit. Despite all that, I was like, fine, you know what? We'll make it. Here it is. I'll be there, and we'll do the thing. And then, eventually got to the point where, Facebook seemed to, or someone or whatever, just didn't seem to appreciate some of the content that I was putting out. So in the group, and only in the group, and when it got that bad, that Facebook, again, if it was in my news feed, it was kind of out there in the public for the whole world to see, I'd kind of get it a little bit more. But the fact that it was in a private group that you could only get into, by being accepted by the, administrator or blah, blah, blah. But since it was in a private group, and even there, you could get censored. I was like, that's enough. We're not going to do this anymore. We can't do this anymore. And there have been a couple other things that people have recommended to me to give a shot, to have to try and have some kind of Sovryn Tech community presence that you could have. Now, this show itself, in fact, the entirety of Zomia 1 is on Podbean. Okay, it's hosted by Podbean, which the Podbean app does allow for comments and commenting and all this. And it's a nice feature, and some of you take advantage of it, and I appreciate it. But not everybody wants to engage with this show via the Podbean app, which is not, I don't want to call it a closed garden necessarily, but I get why, people have their favorite podcast apps, and not all of Podbean's features work within your favorite podcast app. So that's an issue. So what I've decided to do, and I was actually working on, there's still a website getting developed, but it's going to take me a while to get it developed. I had requested for people to give a hand with it, but I get it. Sovryn Tech listeners, busy people, just like the host, just like me, very busy guy. So that is something that will take a while. And certainly, other people who know how website development goes, how that goes. And I'm doing it, I don't have, what is it, Twit? Twit, This Week in Tech, the network, twit.tv. Their website costs something like $250,000 to get developed. It is insane. Now, I don't have that. Not even remotely close to having anything like that. I don't have the resources to be paying somebody to be paying a firm to set up a website. So I was doing it on my own. But anyway, that's going to be a little while out. So how do we handle this desire? Because I'm getting it a lot more again. We got a lot of new listeners on board, and people are wanting a way to engage the community, have a Sovryn Tech community. So I decided to not really cave, because I don't mind this app at all, But with a lot of the new features that it just keeps baking in, like Polls 2.0 and some other ones, which actually just dropped last week, I have created a Sovryn Tech Telegram group. So it's called the Sovryn Tech Polytechnic. At least that's the name for right now. It could get changed. And if you don't know what Polytechnic means, go look it up. Okay, it has nothing to do with poly or polyamory or anything like that. Not even remotely close. But yeah, the Sovryn Tech Polytechnic. So I'm very excited about this. Already have people joining because I announced it on the Q&A. Of course, people who are members of Zomi 1 Underground get advanced info. But this is open to everybody, not just the Zomi 1 Underground members. This is anybody can get in on it. The link is in the show notes. I will not share the link on social media. Okay, this is part of it. Is I'll admit, I'll be frank with you here. Part of this is a test, because to see how many listeners, because I have a lot of people that follow me on social media that don't listen to the show at all, and if I told them that I had a Telegram group, they'd probably join it. But then they're not like listeners, and I really want this to be for the Sovryn Tech listenership. To have that sense of community and everything. So there it is. You can, join in. The link is in the show notes. It'll be in the show notes for every episode of Sovryn Tech that comes out. And you don't just have to talk about Sovryn Tech. You can talk about TIE Fighter Renegades. You can talk about, anything else on Zomi 1, whatever. You talk about whatever you want. Okay. I will run it like I'm going to run it like a tyrant, quite frankly. I'm an anarchist, but I'm going to run it like a tyrant. If I want to just ban somebody, I'll just, that's just how it is. Okay. I'm just going to do it. Like there is no sense of fairness whatsoever. I will do what I want. You have no expectation that somehow, because, and we talked about, this actually fits in nicely with what we were talking about last week, when these people cry that a moderator or even a company or whatever shuts them down. Sorry, Jack. You can cry about it, but your tears are on deaf ears, buddy. So, they have every right to shut down whatever. And just like I have every right to, exclude, block, and do whatever. If I don't like something, whatever, I can do it. I am ready with the hammer. But, that said, I don't really have any rules in the channel, but just, if I decide, oh, well, I don't like this or something like that, well, there you go. Deal with it. Okay. So I eat my own dog food. But it'll be nice. And it's great too, because unlike other options that I've created in the past, even though people want to bring up concerns around the encryption with Telegram, which I understand, there are a lot of advantages to using Telegram, but it is nice to even try or, use an app that most people have. A lot of my listenership is in the cryptocurrency and blockchain and Bitcoin space. And all of them are basically already on Telegram. And something to, and one of the concerns around having it on Telegram is that Telegram has your phone number, just like Signal does. Like it shows the phone number. Well, here's the nice thing, a feature that Telegram bests Signal on. I'm not saying Telegram is better than Signal. I'm just saying that it bests it on. And that is that you can go into your settings and you can hide your phone number. So no one has to know your phone number, okay, when you join the Telegram group. If you were worried about that, you can turn that off, and so that's not an issue. Otherwise, frankly, if it did show, it would have been pointless because I know how much my listenership cares about privacy. So that would have been antithetical to having that privacy. But anyway, I would love for you to join in on the conversation. There's already people joining. Of course, my co-host, Robin Freebeard, he's there. Ellen is there. It's just, anyway, people are already signing up, and I'm really honored by that. And I am very excited to have a place for the Sovryn Tech community that plays nicely across most platforms, which I know that's very important too. So also another thing, if you are worried that joining a Telegram group, holy shit, if there's like, 100 or a few thousand or whatever people that end up in this group, because I think a Telegram group can do up to 200,000. Now I only get about 20,000 listeners a week, not 200,000, but say whatever, every Sovryn Tech listener signed up and you're worried about the notifications, you can mute the group. So that way you can look at it and engage with what gets said in there at your leisure, and it doesn't show up as a notification, and you're not getting 20 billion notifications an hour or something, you know? So again, Telegram does this right. That's why I chose Telegram, is because most of the features that I want for a Sovryn Tech group, effectively, are there. Most of them. I mean, I wish, you can like reply to comments. I wish there was better threading. Maybe someday we'll get something like that. But regardless, I'm excited for this. So please do sign up. The link is you can look under the Foreplay, you'll see the link. You'll see the link at the very bottom of the show notes. You'll see the link in the appendix and sponsors section of the show notes. There's plenty of places to find the link. I'm not going to tell you the link. You're going to have to go and look for it. But all you have to, especially if you're on your smartphone, but I think, if you're on your smartphone, you can just click on the link and boom, it'll take you, and you have the Telegram app installed and everything, and you're logged in. It'll take you right to the group, and you can join just like that. All you need is the link. I don't have to like give you permission or anything like that. You just need the link, and away you go. Now, well, all right, really quick. Because what if you're concerned? Oh, but what if the Golden Stallion? What if Brian Sovryn leaves, Telegram behind someday, blah, blah, blah. If you didn't, just to assuage that, if you didn't recognize, or if you didn't hear me, that like so much of the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space is on Telegram, okay? And I am in that space, for a multitude of reasons that will never change. I mean, the only way the Telegram group would shut down is if Sovryn Tech, the podcast, shut down. And then what's the point to the Telegram group? That's my point. So, no, I'm not going anywhere. I've never left Telegram. I've been on Telegram forever. Like, and I've been supportive of Telegram long before it was actually kind of that it was the app du jour for the crypto space. Long before. Since episode 1 of Sovryn Tech, I've been touting the use of Telegram. I get some of the concerns around it, and I've brought them up, and I share them, okay? But you just keep it in its place and understand that it's an alternative to a lot of what the tech giants are offering. And those alternatives are very important, including considering what happened to Jeff Bezos. Not recently, even though it finally got reported on recently, but what happened in 2018. Now, let's get into this. We got a few stories in the Foreplay to get into, and then we've got a great story of the week, very interesting one, frankly, and then we got a HackSec to get into, and then I think we'll get into reviewing Picard. So I'm just going to read a snippet here from the Wall Street Journal, from a story from January 24th, 2020. It's amazing. Welcome to 2020, folks, if I didn't already say that previously. By the way, real quick, we have our picks of the decade that we need to get into. That won't be this week. That's probably going to be next week. I'd really love to have Ellen in on that. And some of you have already sent in your picks for the decade. And I was like, well, I have a hard time arguing with some of those. So anyway, here we go from the Wall Street Journal. A report concluding that Saudi Arabia likely hacked into Jeff Bezos' smartphone has spurred questions and confusion among cybersecurity experts, even as it has prompted renewed scrutiny of the kingdom and its crown prince. Cyber forensics specialists said the report, which is dated November 2019 but didn't surface publicly until this week, relied heavily on circumstantial evidence to make the case that a WhatsApp account associated with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was probably used to hack into the iPhone of Mr. Bezos, the founder of Amazon.com and owner of the Washington Post. They say the audit left several major technical questions about the incident unexplained and in need of more examination. Let me just read a little bit more here. Quote, "It is not a conclusive report," end quote, said Bill Marzik, a researcher with Citizen Lab, a Toronto-based technology watchdog, blah, blah, that has tracked Saudi Arabia's use of surveillance tools. Quote, "It raises some interesting questions, some of which I think require further explanation." So this does raise, this is what went down. And of course, let's see, what was the Saudi embassy, okay, the Twitter account for the, American embassy of Saudi Arabia. Okay, not the American embassy in Saudi Arabia, but the Saudi embassy USA, that's the handle. said this: recent media reports that suggest the kingdom is behind a hacking of Mr. Jeff Bezos' phone are absurd. We call for an investigation on these claims so that we can have all the facts out. Now, some cybersecurity experts are making the same claim that, the evidence for this is found kind of wanting. And part of that is, so what ended up happening is supposedly, and I guess we have to say that, even though, as far as there is interesting motives for someone involved with the Saudi Arabian government or the kingdom to quote unquote hack Jeff Bezos' smartphone. But effectively, Jeff Bezos was using WhatsApp, was in communication with the Crown Prince on WhatsApp, and the Crown Prince supposedly sent Bezos a video file which included an encrypted downloader that started to upload to somewhere, and supposedly to somewhere in Saudi Arabia, a bunch of data from Jeff Bezos. Now, it's interesting to note that, and we covered this when it happened last year in 2019, when there was all this reporting going on about this. It's interesting to note that there were threats, if you remember. So when the whole scandal, Jeff Bezos, getting divorced and ended up, having this relationship with Lauren Sanchez and all of this, the media that was going to report on the affair that Bezos was having with Lauren Sanchez, they threatened him. Again, we read Bezos's report and basically saying kudos to Bezos that he was not going to, cave under the pressure of, we're going to release this data about you. This is what news organizations were saying, is that we're going to release this about you, this about you, this about you, this about you. Okay. And of course, all of that, including the data about Lauren Sanchez and those, some of the interesting, shall we say, pictures that came from that did end up getting published. We're going to reveal all of this if you don't play ball in X and X way. Okay. So the possibility that those pictures and texts that were published about Bezos and Lauren Sanchez last year may have come from this attack on Jeff Bezos' iPhone. Okay. So, the timeline adds up. Of course, the other part of the timeline here that adds up in this story is that this cyber attack against, or, this hack, hacking is a fine and wonderful thing. I hate using that as a pejorative term. So I'm going to say this cyber attack, because there's nothing that says a cyber attack just has to be between stupid nations. It can be between individuals, or a nation against an individual. So this cyber attack, effectively, against Bezos, came not long after the Washington Post, which of course Bezos owns with his pocket change, was heavily reporting against the Saudi government because of, how they had treated, there was the Saudi journalist, what was his name? Jamal Khashoggi, I think is his name, that was murdered. And the Post was covering it. A, it's one of their journalists. B, the claim was that, it was the Saudi government or whatever that was behind it. And it's not just a claim. It was straight up an assassination by the Saudi government of a journalist, of one of the Post journalists. And the Washington Post was covering that, hardcore, right? So, and Bezos claimed that the leak, and this was going around when the whole Lauren Sanchez thing started, between, the whole scandal out in the open started. There were claims that the Saudi government was behind it, and that this was effectively revenge. Okay. And there's more too. There was an AWS deal being done with the Saudi government and so on that ended up fizzling out. There's a lot of avenues that you could really go with this. Okay. But the motives I gotta admit, do make some kind of sense. Okay, maybe if it wasn't directly the crown prince, that it was some kind of Saudi agent, sure. Now, there's a big conversation, frankly, that could be had around this whole thing. There are, you had a million news outlets and supposedly tech outlets coming out with stories how you can protect yourself and all of this. And a lot of the points that they bring up, I mean, some of them are fine, but no one was really, in my opinion, no one was striking hard enough on some of the big issues here. Okay. But to speak a little bit more, to get a little political on you, again, I'm an anarchist, folks. I don't support any government. So, don't claim that somehow I'm anti this or anti that, or I'm anti all of it. The whole damn thing, America, Saudi, whatever. It is still, to my mind, it is still the strangest fucking thing. There was all that heat that was going on just a few weeks ago, between, the United States and Iran. And there have been so many, and the things that we don't even hear about, the operations being taken against Middle Eastern countries and whatever. Somehow, Saudi Arabia, which is, I mean, again, I'm an anarchist, every country's evil, but like if I were to, for a moment, put on a patriotic hat, okay, and somehow believe that government was actually viable and worthwhile, if I were to say that there is an evil government out there, the first country that I would point at, and I'm also speaking, and I am speaking as a veteran of the United States Army who served in 2 wars in the Middle East. Okay, so I'm not just some Johnny-come-lately on the whole matter. If I had to point at, I would not point at Russia as the most evil government in the world. Instantaneously, I would point at Saudi Arabia. Instantaneously, I would point there. If there are governments that are, every government's shitty to all of its people. There's no question about that. But man, there are some worse than others. And Saudi Arabia is hands down the worst. How the United States has any kind of friendly relationship. Again, I'm wearing my Patriot hat here. Okay, I'm going to take it off in a second because the thing's burning my skin. It's terrible. How the United States has any kind relationship, any amenable relationship with Saudi Arabia is beyond my understanding. In fact, there is no explanation for it. It will always be beyond understanding because the real answer is that all governments are fucking evil and they're not all in cahoots as in they're part of some new world order or something, but they are all in cahoots and they all know that they're all doing dirty shit. And so one doesn't think one's better than the other. Every time there's some war drum getting beaten against some Middle Eastern country, it's never Saudi Arabia. Never. It just never is. When, again, I don't argue for war. I am an absolute peace activist. I'm a radical peace activist, you understand. But holy shit, Patriot hat's still on. If I were to say, hey, we should go to war with blah, 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 like that would be country number one that I would somehow understand what they were talking about. Saying, yeah, boy, those people are fucking evil. Now, let me take this Patriot hat off and light itself on fire and never wear it again. Just got to get that comment out there. Because I know for whatever fucking reason, I do have some listeners who I guess still think the government's a viable thing. Well, I hope you just heard what I said. And some of my listeners somehow still think that war is somehow inevitable at points. No, war is never inevitable, to quote Dr. McCoy. Woo! Anyway, fucking evil. That government, I'm not talking about the people, the Saudi Arabian people, your everyday people. I'm saying that fucking government is fucking evil as fuck. It's the only way to say it. So would they do this? Yeah, hell yeah, they would. Sure they would. Is anything going to be done about it? No. Boy, if they hack Trump's phone, what do you think would happen? Jeez. Anyway, so here's the real. Let's boil down what this means for all of us. Here are one of the popular headlines going around about this story is that, wow, if Jeff Bezos' phone isn't safe, none of ours are safe. That's not unfair. That's a fine conclusion to come to, and one that I don't think people are spending enough time thinking about. And in fact, it's probably the same people who think that war has to be inevitable, and this and X, Y, Z and government has to be inevitable, and blah, blah, blah. No, we just have to have it. I mean, smartphones inherently, by their design, by the just raw amount of sensors on them, by the completely not secure baseband firmware, by the shitty operatings, and they are shitty operating systems. iOS is a shitty operating system. Android is a shitty operating system. Let's call it how we see it. Someone needs to say it. Even if, the idea of the mobile phone was a good idea, even, I'm not saying it is, even if it were a good idea, okay, we are dealing with substandard products and substandard software across the board. As good and as well-intended as Telegram or Signal might be, all of this stuff is shit. I mean, even Signal, okay, to work on desktop, what's it using? Electron, the fucking opiate, I should say, the opiate of software developers. It's lazy ass programming, okay? I'll call it all. But from a security standpoint, straight up, every smartphone is a nightmarish technology. And I mean, this does not speak well. In fact, we were talking about iCloud last week in the last episode, and how, basically Apple said, oh, the FBI wants to make sure they can see what's happening on iCloud. Okay, fine. We won't do end-to-end encryption. Well, I guess iPhones aren't that secure either. Oh, but Stallion, you say. First, I mean, all right, hold on. Let's comment on the iPhone. Bezos is using an iPhone? I mean, not that I expect him to use the Fire Phone, talk about a fucking fail. Not that I expect him to be using that, but I thought Amazon was putting all of its weight into Android, right? And developing so much for Android. I think that there's a do as I say, not as I do problem with Bezos using an iPhone. There is a real issue there. That should be scary in itself. And again, remember, this happened 2 years ago. So, anyway, I know you're saying that, well, the problem wasn't iOS, the problem wasn't an iPhone, the problem was WhatsApp. Oh, but I thought WhatsApp was secure. I thought WhatsApp had it all going on. I thought WhatsApp was, oh, this is the bee's fucking knees. This is privacy. We're doing encryption right. We're doing all this. Now, we don't exactly know because WhatsApp does use for its encryption now, and it has been for a couple of years, it uses the Signal protocol, which I applaud. Okay, I mean, that's great. It uses the Signal protocol wherever. Now, we did bring up when we brought this up, the direct quote on Sovryn Tech, we brought it up, the direct quote from Moxie Marlinspike, the guy behind Signal, okay, that when he looked at the implementation of the Signal protocol into WhatsApp, and this is 3 years ago now, he said it was pretty good. He didn't say it was perfect. He didn't say it was great. He didn't say anything like that. He had very specific language that he used that sounded like, oh, there's some holes in the ship. And that's the point that I brought up when we read his quote about it. WhatsApp is not secure, but what? I don't know. There's actually something really big here in the fact that Jeff Bezos, richest man, depending upon the day, richest man on the planet, is using an iPhone and WhatsApp. Like, that seems so basic, so banal, so boring. I'll tell you, if I had any kind of money, I mean, there's whole other kinds of phones. I mean, it wouldn't even be iOS or Android. I'd be using all kinds of crazy ass shit. Right? Like the kind of stuff the drug dealers use. You know what I mean? I mean, I would be all out, and these companies are out there that sell this stuff. I can't fathom it. And I mean, it does make you wonder too. Like, we've seen the level of paranoia that Mark Zuckerberg, of course, who owns WhatsApp, but Mark Zuckerberg, the kind of paranoia he has on his MacBook, right? He has the USB ports taped off. We saw what software he had installed. He was using Thunderbird, which in my analysis, when we covered that on Sovereign Tech years ago, in my analysis means he's using PGP. And I bet that's the case. And it's because they know, well, that's the only thing that really fucking works. And not unsurprising, years later, when OpenPGP is in funding danger, Facebook swoops in, with some money saying, okay, let's pay the guy who's taking care of OpenPGP, probably because they know they need it. Now, to bolster that point, to bolster the point I just made, in fact, I had this lined up in the Foreplay as well, and that is a tweet, which, tweets can matter that much. There is much reporting on stories as anything else these days, it really seems. So, coming from a cryptographer that needs no introduction, that, of course, being Johns Hopkins' own Matthew Green, here's the tweet, and the tweet is from January 21st, 2020, and this speaks to what we were talking about last week, again, with frankly, what is an iCloud scandal, and that iCloud is effectively malware. Of course, the equal takeaway here is that WhatsApp is in itself malware. I mean, they're going to say that the encrypted downloader that was sent with that video on WhatsApp, that was the malware. No, WhatsApp is the fucking malware. You understand? You have malware on your phone if you have WhatsApp on your phone. I don't know how I can make it any more clear. Regardless, Matthew Green said, a rumor I've heard. This is quote, a rumor I've heard and can't verify, so caveat emptor, is that Apple employees are barred from sharing confidential corporate docs via iCloud. If true, that sure isn't a vote of confidence in the system. Now, that just kind of bolsters my point that I was making with Mark Zuckerberg about using PGP. These companies, the tech giants, know that their own shit isn't secure. Now, I mean, some people responded to Matthew Green's tweet and, said, well, there's reasons because you could have data leaks because some iCloud plans have family share and a lot of other stuff. I don't really buy that so much. I get it. And again, this is, Matthew Green made it clear himself that this is kind of a rumor. But I can bolster that rumor to some degree with things that I have heard in a similar vein. Now, he actually even says below it, it's a compliment, the tweet right under it, complimenting this with another rumor, some Facebook employees are barred from using Messenger for corporate business. Now, that makes all the sense in the world to me. Now, granted, Facebook Messenger also has the Signal protocol baked into it when you turn it on, and it only works on the device that you have that chat, it's like a secret chat, and Telegram has a similar feature, right? Where a secret chat gets activated, it only gets shown on that device. This is also how Skype implements because Skype also has a Signal protocol. But the idea that sure, at certain levels on Facebook that you can't use Messenger to discuss corporate affairs, what a surprise, right? It's probably because they know that even if it's not Facebook themselves that are looking into it, they know perhaps the NSA or pick your alphabet soup organization are looking into it. And this is the part, again, that comes off so strange, is that not even, all of that makes sense. I'm not surprised by any of this if it's true. Some of it's rumor, okay? There are also, again, there are some issues with the idea that a video and an encrypted downloader are what did the business on Bezos's phone, through WhatsApp. I understand that, that there are some issues there, but I am baffled that people in such, shall we say, positions of power, be it the Saudi Crown Prince or be it Jeff Bezos, that they use WhatsApp for anything. Even like on social media, okay? So I think a big reason that a lot of people are on social media is, and I kind of get it, okay, is that they are looking for the love of their life, right? That's what they want. They want to find the love of their life. Ultimately, yes, it's about finding connection and, getting connection, human connection. But the ultimate in human connection is finding the love of your life. And frankly, if you know how to love, in my opinion, and you do find the love of your life, okay, and that can be just one person, despite what some would say, you don't need other people, right? And you don't even want to go on social media. Believe me, I know how this feels, right? I mean, oh boy, things I could say. Point being, I get it that's why people are on social media. And that's why you use filters and all other kinds of bullshit on Instagram. You're trying to make yourself look, and this is true for guys and gals and Z's. I mean, I play no favorites. Okay? You know, because you're trying to find that person and impress them, I guess. I don't know, when really, again, you're probably not going to find love that way because you're not showing the real you that they're going to wake up with every morning if things pan out how you would like them. Okay? Whatever. But we know, and we've talked about this years ago on the show, that, you know, like the quote unquote, because you're hoping to find, I think a lot of people, again, they're looking for that connection, but ultimately looking for that love of their life. And for a lot of people, some of their metrics for the love of their life is, oh, they're really handsome, or they're really sexy, really beautiful, or they're very wealthy, or they have, you know, this body, blah, 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 whatever. Okay. And I mean, when we're talking about Instagram, it's all about the visual. So clearly that's score. If you wanted to find like actual connection, you know, with like, if intellect is what really matters to you, you'd probably be on Goodreads or something looking for somebody, right? So, I mean, come on, be honest. I'll be honest with you. You be honest with me. I'm always honest with you. But we know, again, this is what we reported on years ago, that there are whole other apps that are invite only. And they probably only work on iOS because apparently if you use an Android device, you're not supposed to get laid. Look it up. Go ahead. You have the Golden Stallion's blessing to use Google to get the best search on this. Look up the fact that people judge you by the color of your bubble in iMessage, whether or not you're using an iPhone. And that depends on whether or not they'd even bother to date you or think about you. Dead serious. That's how bad. Woohoo, capitalism. Yeah, okay. This is how superficial we've become. No, that's not... People are superficial regardless of economic system. Anyway, we know there are other apps where the wealthy, you know, like, what? You expect to, I mean, first off, The Rock's married now, but whatever. You expect to get with The Rock because you commented on his Instagram post, or you expect to get with such and such person because you commented on their Instagram. Folks, they ain't even looking there for you. They're on a whole other app where you have to meet such and so many metrics. I don't know, make so much a year, or you know, or have 6-pack abs, or whatever the fuck the metrics is. There's a whole other. I mean, and there's a whole other dating app issue that we could get into that I want to get into in a future Sovereign Tech. But I'll have Ellen on for that to talk about that as well. But this is my point, folks. Okay, like, don't people at this level use different apps? Really? They use WhatsApp? Do they trust Facebook? Or what? I mean, how do they think? What do they know that we don't? Or is Bezos just an idiot when it comes to that? But what? He doesn't have somebody working for him? And I know he does. He doesn't have somebody working for him that tells him, hey, don't use WhatsApp. No, don't use this. How does this work? I mean, the solution here is simple. Don't use WhatsApp. I mean, the solution can get even simpler and get out of the iOS Android paradigm, whatever that means to you. Okay? Or the Google Android paradigm, I guess maybe I should say, because there are options outside of that, right? But, and I know you're like, well, isn't that kind of extreme? No, how hard is it to not use WhatsApp? I get it. I know how popular it is around the world and everything. Well, if you are somebody with the stroke, okay, with the stroke that Jeff Bezos has, and you can't convince other people to use another app, I guess we are all fucked. If the richest man in the world can't convince other people to use another app, even like people like the Crown Prince or whatever, this is a mind-boggling story in so many ways, that people at the conventionally, and keyword conventionally, at the top of the heap, they are using these shitty fucking apps and these shitty implementations and shitty devices themselves. This is all very weird, because I think a narrative that we have kind of been running with on Sovereign Tech for a while is basically that the upper echelons, as it were, civilization, you know, I don't know, you can use terms, I don't agree with them, but you can use terms like the 1% or the government, alphabet soup organizations, blah, 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 whatever, the money masters, I don't care, take your pick of term. Okay, the powers that be, they, them, those, okay, that they know that all of this stuff is rigged and they are pushing it on all of us, right? They want us using WhatsApp even though they don't use it, right? They want us using Messenger even though Facebook doesn't even use Messenger. I mean, they, you know, when you get to a certain level corporate-wise, and it seems, again, pretty clear that Zuckerberg uses PGP. I mean, and that's just for starters. But with Bezos using an iPhone and using WhatsApp, again, for communications with potentially with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, right? It'd be one thing, okay, yeah, maybe he uses it to talk to a little person or you know, in his mind or in, you know, conventionally, one of the little people, you know, or something like that. Or, hey, I get it. Yeah, sure, The Rock. The Rock has an iPhone and he has an Instagram, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's a pretty good bet that that's not his only smartphone. And also, it's a pretty goddamn good bet that Instagram account, a lot of the times, is being operated by an assistant, and it's not him doing it himself. But this is something, this situation with Bezos is effectively something that was engaged in between a high-level person in government in Saudi Arabia, royalty, okay, and, again, the richest man in the world. When it's being done between those kinds of people, unless all of this, unless the claim that it was done by the Crown Prince or blah, 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 or that it was done by the Saudi government is all bullshit, which I suppose is possible, unless it's that, like, I don't get it. Is everybody trapped? Yeah, like, is everybody trapped in this, you know, shitty smartphone, shitty apps system that we constantly criticize and warn against on this show? Everybody, not just the little people? Yeah, there's really broad ramifications for this, and I'm going to be chewing on it for a while because this totally blows my mind that this was even a thing and that this happened. But you know, there is something actually viable that you could do with a phone. You don't need a smartphone to do it, but you need a phone. You could call in to Sovereign Tech sponsor Free Talk Live. That's right. You can also go to their website, freetalklive.com, and you can, oh man, actually, no, you can do it with your phone because they have like the listen lines and everything. I think those are still running. It's amazing all of the ways that you can get access to Free Talk Live. But you can call into the show, run 7 nights a week, 3 hours a night. Go to freetalklive.com to listen to all those episodes, and you can listen to episodes going back over a decade. It is amazing. The number 27 talk show in the United States, and you only get there by being fucking consistent as hell. And they are, and they have been. It is amazing how I think I do a lot of audio work. Man, nothing compared to what Free Talk Live turns out. It is dynamite. I used to be a host. It's really something. So, but you can call in. It's an open phone show. Talk about whatever you want to talk about. Talk about this crazy shit with Bezos. I mean, whatever you want to talk about. But go to freetalklive.com. Check out the show. If you want to, you can let them know that the Golden Stallion sent you. Believe me, they're going to know who you're talking about because they know me. We're fans of each other. Okay. So go to freetalklive.com. Get your hookup on that. And I thank them for sponsoring Sovereign Tech. Now, I want to end off the foreplay. And I want to get, actually, this will play nicely into the story of the week. It's time to go to one of Sovereign Tech's favorite places, of course, because this is a show about science and technology. Okay, not just technology, there's science as well. And that is outer space. Woo! Well, we talked about maybe 4 or 5 episodes ago, and I know last week we actually followed up on the matter because... So, earlier... approximately a month ago, the U.S. Space Force became a thing, the 6th branch of the U.S. military. We talked about it quite a bit on a recent episode of Sovereign Tech. We talked about it last week, how they finally revealed their uniforms, and their uniforms were fucking stupid digital woodland camo. You know, and like I said, what are like they're planning on landing on a forest moon or something, you know? They're going to land on a moon of Endor. What the fuck is wrong with them? Or maybe they know Venus under the cloud layer actually has trees. There's a thought. Looking around. Anyway, I'm not saying that's a fact. I'm just... Anyway, ridiculous, those uniforms. I mean, the military is ridiculous, so they might as well dress ridiculous while they're being ridiculous, right? That makes sense. I agree. But now, you know, and we knew when we first talked about it, when it was first announced, when the Space Force was first announced, we talked about this a bit. And we mentioned that, okay, they haven't worked out their uniforms yet. They haven't worked out their logo yet, blah, 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 blah. Okay, what's going to be their theme song or anything like that? And I swear to fuck if it's anything by Alexander Courage or Jerry Goldsmith, I'm going to go blank. No. Yeah. So, social media went nuts, which actually... I mean, that's just what social media fosters, right? Social media is not a place for intelligent conversation at all. Thank you. Social media went crazy with saying, holy shit, and this is probably some kind of AstroTurf marketing, but holy shit, because the logo came out for the United States Space Force and everybody said, what? They stole it from Star Trek. They stole it from Star Trek. And you feel free to go on Twitter or wherever else and look it up for yourself, and you'll see it, and everybody making comments. And look, I can't make it any more abundantly clear over the 8 years of this show how much I despise the military and wish that no militaries existed on the planet ever again. So I am not in support of the military, even one that has to do with space. And I love outer space, baby. I am ready to go. But you people that thought it was a Star Trek logo, or thought that they were copying the Star Trek logo, now, and used it to somehow make fun of Trump, which I'll be the first in line to make fun of Trump, that piece of shit. Okay? No. Now, while perhaps in 1982, which granted, Star Trek was hot at that time, right? You're going into Star Trek 2, you had Star Trek the Motion Picture, which was a success, by the way, and the original series was running wild on syndication. When in 1982, when the Air Force Space Command was commissioned, which used basically the same logo as the now commissioned United States Space Force, right, which was commissioned at the end of December. All they did was they just took the Space Command logo. Okay, yeah, they did. They put that little circle on it that made it look like the Starfleet Command logo more. And yes, it looks like a Delta. Yeah, I get it that it looks like, the classic Delta Shield Star Trek logo. I understand the little circle. Maybe they took that little circle from Star Trek. But this is, originally the Air Force Space Command logo, which has been around since the 80s, had that arrow, okay, and it had, kind of like a Bohr's atom model, with the two circles going around it and everything. And showing the Earth behind it. And hey, I get it. If you want to say they copied... Now, here's where you would have been accurate and you wouldn't have been a fucking moron. Okay? If you had said they copied it in the 80s, okay, you've got something. Right? Because it does look a lot like, especially stuff from Star Trek the Motion Picture. You would have had something there. But saying that they're copying it now, no. No, it was a lack of intelligence on the matter. And I'm not surprised. Most people clearly don't have any real knowledge around the military. And hey, part of me is glad, but then don't talk about it. Okay. Because as I say often, and from my mentor, Harlan Ellison, who he initially said, you do not have a right to your opinion. You have a right to your informed opinion. So have a fucking informed opinion. All this stuff, this is part of the reason I made the fucking group on Telegram. Because even Twitter, and I'm not going to leave Twitter, Okay, I'm there. Okay, there are people I have to interact with, and there's, well, again, like we were reading from the Matthew Green tweet and all that. I mean, a lot of stuff that this show is warning about or reports on or etc. Will come from that. So I don't want to call it. I'm not going to call it a necessary evil. Not in the, because there's a lot of security things that Twitter really does right. Okay, but that's not to get. I don't want to get lost in the weeds on that. All right. The point is that the conversations on Twitter are so horrible, and the bulk of the people who are conversing on Twitter are absolutely horrible human beings, and it just depresses you to no end. I can't look at it. I mean, I'll do it when I want to intentionally, and I'm looking for something, but I'm sure as hell not going to. Gee, I'm feeling bored. Let me go on Twitter. That is never going to happen for me. Not a fucking chance. Because the shit just keeps on happening. I mean, and you just see all these mup runs, who are making these stupid fucking claims, and nobody's taken a minute, hell, 10 seconds to do a little bit of research. They're just reacting, and that's another thing. Along with anger and other things that social media fosters, it just fosters reaction instead of actual action, and that is a huge problem. Okay, but anyway, so Space Command now, all right, well, so the argument could go that Star Trek took the Delta Shield from kind of that like swoop, that red swoop that's in the NASA logo. Somebody could kind of make that argument. I don't really see that, because also remember that the Delta Shield originally was just a symbol for the Enterprise crew. It was not the Starfleet symbol. That would happen later on, okay, where it would be for all of Starfleet. And I mean, that's fine. But regardless, yeah, no, the Space Command did not copy Star Trek as far as this goes. Something far more concerning is that effectively the governing body of the Space Force, which ultimately... So, because the other problem here too is it's abundantly clear that people still think that the Space Force is sending, the military is sending like soldiers with guns into space. We talked about that. No, that's not their mission. That's not what they are about. The military organization that would handle that would be what is now called, not the Air Force Space Command. I mean, the Air Force Space Command effectively became the United States Space Force, right? So it makes sense why they have a similar logo. Who would actually send soldiers into space, if that were a thing, would be the United States Space Command, not the Air Force Space Command, the United States Space Command, which is separate from the United States Space Force. Now, the United States Space Force, of course, its governing body is Space Operations Command. Now, this is where shit gets a little insidious with Star Trek. Because, do you want to know? So you have the United States Space Force. What's the acronym for that? USSF. Okay? Just like the Air Force, USAF. But the acronym for Space Operations Command is literally SPOC. SPOC. It's Spock. Now there is a Star Trek reference if I've ever seen one. There's no question they thought that one out. Because you could have just as easily, there's no need to include the P, for that with space, because that's where the P comes from, or even if it comes from op, then the P would be after the O. They totally did that to get those Star Trek vibes. And that's kind of insidious. And look, as somebody who, I can admit this. In fact, an episode of Sovereign Trek I haven't gotten to yet, just because of scheduling and everything. I've wanted to review for a while the documentary, the Deep Space Nine documentary of What We Left Behind. There is a moment in that is really disturbing, but I can relate to, unfortunately. There's a moment in that documentary where they talk to veterans and present service people and all this. And they basically claim that Deep Space Nine / Star Trek is what convinced them to join the military. Now, and I was going to talk about this when I reviewed the documentary. Haven't done that yet, but here we go. I understand. and I've brought this up, I know in the past on, I don't know, on some shows, but that desire to have like the ranking system, you know, to like be an ensign or a lieutenant or whatever in Star Trek, right? Because that's their ranks. I really wanted, you know, to have that rank. Of course, the irony is that when I actually got into the Army, regardless of how decorated that I ended up being, I never wanted to become even a sergeant. Became a specialist, and I just stuck there. Okay, I didn't want rank by that point. But one of my initial things, you know, that made me like the idea of going into the military is, ooh, I can get rank like in Star Trek. I will be blah, blah, blah. I'll be ensign, or you wouldn't be ensign because you'd have to be in the Navy for that. But I could be lieutenant, whatever, right? And I mean, Star Trek, the other part you got to understand with Star Trek is that Gene Roddenberry, and he did, to his credit, could tell you until you were blue in the face, and you could hear Picard say it directly in the episode Peak Performance from season 2. He just says it point blank. Starfleet is not a military organization. That is a direct quote from Captain Picard. Gene Roddenberry would say over and over again, Star Trek is not a military organization. But I can remember reading, and I want to say it was like issue 99 or something like that of Star Trek Communicator, which was kind of the Star Trek magazine at the time. I can remember reading in that there, it was a one-page article, I think, saying, it asked the question in the headline, is Starfleet a military organization? And if I remember correctly, and I read that when I was a kid, okay, little kid. If I remember correctly, it basically came to the conclusion that it's like, well, it kind of is and kind of isn't. It's kind of like the same problem in Star Trek with money, right? Where, yeah, there is money, but there isn't. You know, like there's no really, and with like any franchise, Star Wars has this problem. They all have this problem. You have a bunch of different writers, and different writers have different fucking ideas, you know, and different concepts and implementations and philosophies. So that's why it seems like such a kludgy mess. That's why you can't really answer. Wait, does the Federation have money or doesn't it? Which is it? You know, just like, is Starfleet a military organization or isn't it? But the important thing to understand is that as much as Gene Roddenberry would say outside of Star Trek, at conventions, wherever else, in writing, Starfleet's not a military organization, Captain Picard will come right out in on screen and say Starfleet's not a military organization. You have to understand, Gene Roddenberry is the only person that thought that way. Okay? And and Gene Roddenberry only had control of Star Trek for maybe its first and some of its second season of the original series. Star Trek the Motion Picture. In fact, Star Trek the Motion Picture is where Gene Roddenberry had the most control over his baby, over Star Trek. And then he had control of Star Trek for the first and some of the second season of The Next Generation, which is probably why in the second season episode Peak Performance, you get that quote from Picard. Okay? About, you know, Starfleet not being a military organization, because Gene Roddenberry was right there to lay that out. You'll never hear that you'll never hear that stuff again. In fact, you almost get the opposite. It was in season 3, or maybe it was season 4, when Moriarty gets out of the holodeck, quote unquote, on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and he sees security officers from the Enterprise, you know, walk up to him, and he's getting taken away to whatever, you know, to wherever on the ship. And Moriarty looks at them. He says, policemen. I'd recognize them in any century. I mean, he's point blank saying, oh, yes, no, this is a military/police organization, without question. You know? So, but I say all this, and I had a bigger conversation around this if you listen to the last episode of Sovryn Trek that I did. But I say all this to suggest that, you know, this idea that Star Trek does not promote the military, there is you could probably chalk it up to a raw amount of maybe, I don't know, 30 to 40 hours of Star Trek out of the literal hundreds, if not thousands of hours of Star Trek that exists, where that is the running concept, the running idea, is that Starfleet isn't a military organization. Because that's about 40 hours of Star Trek is about all the control that Gene Roddenberry ever had. As soon as you get to Star Trek 2, you got Nicholas Meyer, who, hey, great writer, okay? I like the guy. You got Nicholas Meyer coming in, he's doing naval whistles, the whole naval uniforms and everything. I mean, he changes it up. He turns it into a military inside of one film. I understand why people love Star Trek too, but then also it's not really Star Trek. Like, again, we're talking about being honest. Let's be honest. Okay. So, I saw in the bulk of Star Trek that was out there. In fact, this is a great conversation that I could get into when we talk about Picard. But the bulk of what I saw in Star Trek was more or less, very pro-military. That doesn't mean that overall Star Trek is bad. I mean, there's more elements than that. Like, Star Trek alone is not enough to convince somebody to go in the military. It needs other things. I needed other reasons. And I feel terrible that I feel terrible about my military services. Everyone should. But yes, you should. You need more, but it is there. Okay? It really is. Okay? And the idea of now it happening vice versa. Okay, the reverse occurring where now the military is kind of using these very out there symbols that Star Trek have, it's like even people that don't read comic books, they know the Superman symbol. And they kind of know what Superman's about, just like the Mickey Mouse ears, and you have some concept of what that is. Okay. The symbol, the Delta Shield symbol for Star Trek, sure, people see that and they get the gist, and they probably don't think of Star Trek or Starfleet really as, like, at the very least, they don't think of it as evil, right? And so there's positive connotations that come with that. So I'm not against the idea. And again, certainly with the acronym for Space Operations Command, yeah, they're totally swiping from Star Trek. They had an opportunity to use a completely new symbol. They did not. The symbol is similar to the Starfleet symbol. So would they use that, hoping to garner some positivity around its existence? Yeah, sure they would. Sure. All of this is to say that, sure, they can definitely be using cultural symbols to, again, garner some positive press, some positive thought towards it. But they are not. Ultimately, they are not copying Star Trek. They are using, again, unless you're making the claim they did it in the 80s, but in 2019 or in 2020, when they finally put out the official symbol, no. So stop, shut up. You're just wrong, okay? In the interest of time, because we ended up getting really deep on one of these conversations, let's take a break, and I will come right back. We'll get into HackSec. And we'll have to save the story of the week. Had to do with going to outer space, which would have been kind of fitting, but that's a conversation that, frankly, in my opinion, never gets old, and we're getting, as I've talked about many times, even with the Space Force's own existence now, is something we're getting much closer to. Where the everyday person is heading to the stars. But anyway, let's take a break. I'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech. Woo! Hey, if you have a project that needs reliable cryptocurrency data, check out blocktap.io. Blocktap.io is a universal cryptocurrency API. You can get historical prices for Bitcoin and other digital assets that you can use to build charts and do market analysis. Blockchain data is also indexed, so you can get transaction statistics, address balances, and more for Bitcoin and other networks. Blocktap.io is free for personal use, and you don't even need to create an account to access the API. To get started, try some of the example queries on the homepage at blocktap.io. Again, that's blocktap.io, blocktap.io, and we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Woo! Let's get back to the show.
HackSec.
It is time for HackSec, where we generally talk issues of hacking and security, but in this case, I want to talk about the importance of the open web. That's ultimately where this is going to land. This is a blog post, and an important one, a great one, that got shared actually on a Bitcoin group that I am in on Telegram. And it's by a guy, Anil Dash. And I want to read this. It's not long. I mean, it's a couple paragraphs, more or less. but it's raising a very important point that, well, we'll talk about the ramifications here, but this is a really, really big deal here that I think a lot of people just aren't even considering, and that's why I want to bring it up. So it's from December 10th, 2019. Link is in the show notes if you want to read it yourself, but it is, speaking of links, quote, here's the headline, quote, "Link in bio," end quote, "is a slow knife. We don't even notice it anymore. Link in bio. It's a pithy phrase usually found on Instagram, which directs an audience to be aware that a pertinent web link can be found on that user's profile. Its presence is so subtle and so pervasive that we barely even noticed. It was an attempt to kill the web." Let's read it here. Links on the web are incredibly powerful. There are decades of theory behind the role of hyperlinks and hypertext. Did you know in most early versions, links were originally designed to be two-way? You'd be able to see every web page or every page on the web that links to this one. But even in the very simple form that we've ended up with on the World Wide Web for the last 30 years, links are incredibly powerful, opening up valuable connections between unexpected things. Just Stanley breaking in, think Wikipedia. Holy shit, right? How many times you go down that rabbit hole? Reading on, for a closed system, these kinds of open connections are deeply dangerous. If anyone on Instagram can just link to any old store on the web, how can Instagram, meaning Facebook, Instagram's increasingly overbearing owner, tightly control commerce on its platform? Oh, that's what that's all about. Let's keep reading. If Instagram users could post links willy-nilly, they might even be able to connect directly to their users, getting their email addresses or finding other ways to communicate with them. Links represent a threat to closed systems. So, Stallion breaking in for a second. We're going to read more. There's not much more, but we're going to read more. But this points at, if you are often wondering, and believe me, part of the reason I created the Telegram group, I've tried doing independent web presences in the past, or even getting people onto IRC and so on. Okay. Part of the reason that you can't really get the horse to water, as it were, that you can't, I hate these terms, but fine, we'll use some marketing terms, that you can't convert people over, say, to your platform, be it like your own WordPress site or your IRC channel or whatever, is because a lot of the big platforms that everybody kind of starts off on, or for some parts of the world is their entire internet, say Facebook or whatever. Facebook does allow for the posting of links, but then also they're getting rid of their newsfeed, right? And, well, anyway. Instagram was very, very clever. I don't want to say smart, because I don't think it was ultimately a smart move, nor was it a good one. But Instagram was very clever in not allowing for links to be put there. Now, you could argue that originally the Instagram folk, their reasoning for that is because they really wanted to keep a lot of slimy scammers, whatever else, people, your slick entrepreneurs, and I mean the ones that are annoying, who I'm talking about, from hijacking the platform and just turning it into another ad platform, more or less. Now, of course, that and this would be, in Instagram's argument, would be to allow for a better user experience. And maybe Instagram ultimately felt that way. Of course, probably what Instagram was doing at the time, we can't exactly prove this and say it for certain, but probably what they were doing is they wanted to have a platform that really was just about pictures, but those pictures were being used to improve various algorithms and quote unquote AI and so on. And that's where their real bread and butter was going to come from. Okay. At the time when Instagram got bought out by Facebook, it was $1 billion deal. That was unheard of at the time. That was considered, everybody's like, what? How is this worth $1 billion? Well, part of the reason it was worth $1 billion was the raw amount of photographic data that Instagram had that could make Facebook a lot of money by, creating varying, algorithms. And, well, anyway, we don't have to go down the conspiracies of where that kind of shit gets used. And I don't think that I don't think they're unbelievable conspiracies. I think they're very real conspiracies. But, just look at Clearview and some other things and you get an idea of where that's going. Regardless, one could argue there were some good reasons that Instagram didn't want to allow for links to be used on Instagram, but then ultimately I wouldn't say that it was entirely benign. Like that there was, it's the only reason they didn't allow for that was because Instagram was able to make money in other ways, right? And it does come down to controlling the platform and controlling what can get put on there and so on. So, and I mean, as far as what Facebook's doing with it, I mean, again, the founders left Facebook because it seems pretty clear they did not agree with the direction that Facebook was taking Instagram in. Got to keep that in mind. Let's keep reading this story here. There's the subheader, precarity and scarcity. Here's the thing, though. People like links. So closed systems have to present a pressure release valve. Hashtags are a great way out. They use the semiotics of links. Early versions of hashtags on social platforms were really barely more than automated links to a search for a particular term, but are also constrained by the platform they live on. A hashtag is easier to gather into a database, to harvest, to monetize. It's much easier, sure, but it also doesn't have all the messiness of a real link. Instagram doesn't have to worry that clicking on its hashtags will accidentally lead people to Twitter, or vice versa. And the ultimate triumph of being anti-web is to make links scarce. The smallest possible number of links a platform could allow is 0, so Instagram gets as close to that theoretical limit as possible and gives you 1. You can have 1 link. Aren't you grateful? 1. There are some legitimate reasons platforms limit links. Spammers abuse links, Stanley breaking in, much like we were talking about. Trust is hard to verify around links. Too many scammers make links that look real but lead to sketchy sites. Building a system to monitor all the links being posted on a big platform does take some cost. Maybe you can have a link again if you are already in the 1% most influential users on the platform and put it in a story, the part of Instagram's experience that drives the engagement metrics they care about. Maybe you just give up and pay for links by buying advertising. But killing off links is a strategy. It may be presented as a cost-saving measure or as a way of reducing the sharing of untrusted links, but it is a strategy designed to keep people from the open web, the place where they can control how and whether someone makes money off of an audience. The web is where we can make sites that don't abuse data in the ways that Facebook properties do. Stanley breaking in, that is such a key point. Is that we can have some of this interconnectedness and we can do it right, but you can't do it with the tech giants. You can't do it on Facebook's platform. You can't do it on Twitter's platform. You can't do it on any of them. Let's keep reading. Links take us to places where we can make choices that Instagram never would. Next subheader, imagine something new. With billions of people using the major social platforms and the people who remember a pre-social media web increasing in age while decreasing as cultural force on the internet, we're rapidly losing fluency in what the internet could look like. We've almost forgotten that links are powerful and that restraining links through artificial scarcity is an absurdly coercive behavior. I don't care about the imagined good old days of the web, and I'm not a Pollyanna about the wild open web being some panacea for all the harms that technology and the internet can enable. But I do think coercive methods of controlling people are a danger, and some of the most insidious techniques are when a platform subtly erases empowering opportunities for its users. So let's look at all the apps that live under our thumbs and interrogate the choices they're making, and then imagine what they would look like if we demanded that our tools don't tie our hands. Woo! I mean, I wanted to read this. I wanted to bring this up, have a little conversation around it, because I don't think a lot, and I know. All right, look, okay, we got to talk about this part. I get it, okay. I have no idea why Google Assistant just opened up on one of my devices, but it should go to fucking hell. I know you feel like, some of us feel like, and there are some people who are in certain positions where I get it. You have an account, say a Facebook account, say an Instagram account, same thing. Say, ultimately, say a Twitter account, say a whatever account. And you did that as a defensive posture, okay? Because if you're not on there, someone else might pretend to be you on there. And that's a problem. So you have a real account that you can tell people, if you need to, hey, this is my only real account. Yeah, I don't do anything with it. I don't post on it, which I applaud. But this is the one. I understand that. I wish we didn't have to do those sorts of things, but I do get it where some people have to do that sort of thing. Okay? Or you have to plant your flag. But again, once you make the account, you don't have to keep the app installed on your phone. And most importantly, you don't have to use it. You don't. Now, a key point you need to grasp. You need to understand this. And this is basically an axiom when it comes to the human condition, when it comes to being human. You cannot, I'm not saying this is only prerequisite for having personal freedom or freedom of any kind, but it's one of them. You cannot have freedom without privacy. You can't. It's an axiom. It is a fact. There is no argument to be had here. You can try. You're going to lose. You cannot have freedom without privacy. If you claim to be some kind of freedom-loving libertarian or something like that, and you are regularly posting on Instagram, I have questions. We don't have to cover them right now, but I have questions. Yeah, I get it. Okay, I have an Instagram account, whatever. But I know how many of you, people who are so, woo, privacy, woo, this, woo, that, hey, I hear you. And when I hear it, I'm like, yeah, that's a great message. I wonder if they walk that talk. Oh, I guess not. I've been there. I used to use Instagram, but then you get to the point, and this is why I keep bringing this kind of stuff up, is to, okay, fine, I didn't realize this either. Here, I am presenting you with the information. I am presenting you with the case. It is inarguable. Have a good day. I hope you, at the very least, just stop posting on Instagram, even if you don't delete it. You can't have privacy without, you can't have freedom without privacy. You just can't. Okay? All right. Now, if you are, and this kind of speaks to what we were talking about last week, if you are interested in, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, or I'm going to be an agorist, or I'm going to be blah, 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 I don't know, whatever, I'm going to make money on the internet. There we go. That's what we can boil it down to. Much like we talked about in last week's episode, it's a good idea to not have to rely on a major platform that can rightfully and at any point shut you down. And certainly Instagram and any of these social media platforms would fit that bill because they can. Okay? This is why Bitcoin is so important, right? Because you can't really shut it down. And you can't block. I mean, you could individually block addresses, but there's no centralized authority that can block addresses and all this other stuff. Okay? I mean, there's a reason WikiLeaks ran to Bitcoin, right? You are, like I said last week, you are a shitty business person, and frankly, a shitty capitalist, if you are relying upon these platforms that can shut down basically at any given point, or that can be shut down on you at any given point for any reason whatsoever. It could be totally, totally arbitrary. But that's usually the argument that I get. It's well, I need it for, look, I said earlier that I use Twitter to follow some of the tweets of whatever varying people in cryptography and all this other crap and blah, blah, blah. And I will tweet now and again and all of this. Sovryn Tech does not at all rely upon Twitter. Not for a second. In fact, there was a while, and you can see the gap, where there's a span of a couple of years where I didn't post on Twitter at all. And the show at that time was in its largest growth phase ever. I went from 5,000 listeners to over 17,000. So don't tell me I need Twitter or that I need Instagram, because I was barely even using that. Don't tell me I need any of these things to have my podcast grow or have my business grow. There are things we do out of a certain sense of pragmatism that we need to, okay? We need to have a smartphone for, say, I don't know, whatever business we happen to be in, whatever job we happen to have. I hear these, I hear these arguments. I think there's ways to still mitigate how much that smartphone is with you, but I hear you. These social platforms, no. You don't need any of them. You just don't. There's no argument for that. All right, what, you're an Instagram model? Okay, you're an Instagram model. You're going to be passé in no time. I hope you're making some kind of fucking plan. And I'd love for you to be honest with people that you are. You don't mind railing against the government. You don't mind railing against whatever the fuck else is out there. But, you can't, like, tell people, hey, I'm actually just using Instagram for the next 5 years, and then I'm done, and I'm running away. I'd love to hear that kind of honesty, but you don't tell that to people, because if they get the sense that, oh, Instagram won't be here in 5 years, they're not going to support you on Instagram now, right? It's ridiculous. All of these platforms are about this kind of control, and they do these little things. It's the death of 1,000 cuts, right? The slow knife, like Anil said here, where they really are trying to kill the open web. Now, there was a time where the open web was not, quote unquote, how things could even begin to be, right? Because in the 90s, when I was a teenager, you had AOL and the internet, or the open web, as we would call it now. Okay, you had and this is, if you weren't there, you don't know what these conversations were like. You, like in high school, talking to people, so, do you have AOL or do you have the internet? That was the exact verbiage that would get used. You understand? Do you have AOL or do you have the internet? Things, the circle, the wheel is turning. Okay. To where Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whoever, and this isn't new, we've talked about this before, they want to get back to that, okay? To where it becomes a conversation of, do you have the open web or do you have Facebook? Do you have the open web or do you have Instagram? Whatever. Okay, they are trying to get back to those AOL days. And I want you to just, to understand Anil's argument about we are missing out because of these platforms wanting to make these very closed systems, these very closed gardens. We are missing out on what the internet could be. I want you to understand that you can go back, I don't know, go to DuckDuckGo's images or whatever, and I want you to look at AOL in the 90s. Okay? Pick any time. You can go 98, I don't care, whatever. Look at AOL. And in fact, actually do a progression. Look at AOL like in 96 and go to like 99 or something like that. And I want you to see the absolute lack of innovation and the lack of change in that small period of time. And you could go even broader if you could change the time span as much as you want. And this is the point. And this is Anil's point and mine. I think. I don't want to necessarily speak for Anil, but I think this is what he's getting at. What the rest of the World Wide Web, outside of America Online, what it was doing was remarkable at the time. Okay? And if there was not an open web, if everything was just AOL, there would be stagnation and control. And all of these people who talk about, I made all this money, and I don't mean the dot-com boom, but so many people that came up with different web technologies, Skype, go down the fucking list of them, that have done crazy money because of the open standards, because of the openness of the World Wide Web outside of AOL. You are hindering all of that by, in my opinion, even if you want to claim you're doing business, by doing business or even just personal use of these platforms. Really? You're fucking it all. And I get Anil's point. Like, what could the web be if if all of these different companies, the tech giants, whoever else, weren't trying to just fucking lock everything down? Fortunately, Google failed in trying to kill the link and kill so many other things. Google Plus at one point was meant to be like the central, that was going to be fucking AOL. They tried hard. Like, they made it so that to use YouTube, you had to have Google Plus. A lot of this, they all backpedaled on, of course, and Google Plus is effectively dead outside of some businesses. But you get my point. Instagram tried to kill the link. Fortunately, that hasn't really happened yet. But if you don't see the fact that Instagram only gives you that one link in your bio, if you don't see that as a problem and as malicious business strategy, I don't know, why are you listening to this show? In fact, why are you even... You don't know how to do good business. Sure, you know how to control people and like have some kind of, I don't know, some controlling stake. But you're certainly not about allowing for other people to be entrepreneurs and allowing people to, grow their business and do whatever else if you're relying upon that, or if your business tactic requires you to close off avenues of connection and conversion and everything else. If you think that that's good business, man, no wonder we're so screwed right now. No fucking wonder. Because, you're just a bunch of cutthroat assholes. You don't think about a lot of these little things that, they only allow for this, they allow for this, they allow for the, and they changed this feature, and anything that doesn't let you readily get to, even the fact that Instagram now has stores built into it, right? They don't want you to get to the open web, or they build in a web browser into the app. That way you think you're still on Instagram, but when the time is right, they'll just control it so that, it can't open certain websites. In fact, we talked about this. If you shared this was a couple of years ago, if you shared a Telegram link, right? A link that came from Telegram and would have the Telegram link shortener, official link shortener. If you put a Telegram link into WhatsApp and shared it, WhatsApp would block the link, even though it's just a link shortener that's supposed to go to some website. But no, WhatsApp doesn't want you to even know Telegram fucking exists. This is the path that we're heading down. I'm sorry. Instagram, using these platforms for business is antithetical to business in general. You are robbing effectively from the future. Now, if you want to come out and say, well, I only care about me, hey, very egoist of you, but most of you aren't claiming to be egoists. And also, of course, egoists really don't just care about themselves, right? But that's getting into a huge philosophical conversation. But this is really, just a terrifying concept that most people, they just think, oh, well, Instagram just only gives me one link. They are not thinking about the fact that, wow, what does that really mean? What are they trying to do? They're trying to kill links themselves by doing that. And then, again, if you're into business, economics, and all this stuff, and you're using Instagram, you're a charlatan. You're a liar. You are against the very thing you claim to be promoting. That's ultimately what this says. Anyway, I'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech. We got to talk Picard. Here we go. I'll be right back with some more. Hey, baby, I know. You are tired of Gmail. You have had enough. Well, I have a solution for you. What I want you to do is you go to Fastmail, okay? It's fastmail.sovryntech.com. That's the URL you can use. You're going to get a discount with that. You are going to love this. This is email for email's sake. This company does nothing more. Just email, and they do it right. All the latest security technologies. You want to log into your account with your YubiKey? You can do that. Fastmail has your hookup. Very inexpensive plans. I want you to check it out. You go to fastmail.sovryntech.com. That'll get you the hookup, and it's an honor to have them as a part of Sovryn Tech. Woo! Let's get back to the show.
The Climax.
Well, it is time to do something that, well, actually, I've already done it this episode. We already talked about Star Trek quite a bit, didn't we? And we even mentioned the holy name, that being Picard. Now, I have to tell you. So, the first episode of Picard, of the show, Star Trek Picard, only on CBS All Access, which, complaints ensue. That's fine. You can just torrent it, folks. I did. But anyway. I have to say, so yeah, January 23rd, 2020, this came out. It's going to be 10 episodes, the whole season. We already have the second season confirmed. We know that. But I never thought I mean, what was it, 2002? When, I know it was 2002 because it was the year I went into the military. In 2002, when Star Trek Nemesis came out, I mean, once I knew that had effectively tanked in theaters, okay, the reality around that, whatever, I mean, there were, the people that wrote Star Trek Nemesis, was that Mangels and whoever else, they had plans for if Nemesis did a really, really, if it did big money, okay, in theaters, they had plans for where the Next Generation was basically going to go after that. And it seemed pretty clear when you watch Nemesis that was, they had that in mind. Like you have B4, right? The guy who, or the character that was like the earlier version of Data. It's not just Data and lore. There was also B4. In that, he gets Data's memory downloaded into him, apparently. And other things, Riker leaving and so on. I mean, there were clearly plans for the future of the Next Generation, whatever members of the crew would actually be a part of that. Okay. And they said as much. I remember reading a TV Guide interview at the time that, if this goes well, we have ideas of where we want this to go. There was a chance back then that they were considering having Star Trek return to television. Or have the Next Generation, have Patrick Stewart return to television, as Captain Picard or whatever they ended up having in mind. I could believe that was an idea then, especially since I think for the studios, they felt like Star Trek Enterprise was not meeting expectations yet, even though that show would have really just started and had been around for maybe about a year or so. So at that time I was hopeful, before Nemesis actually came out and didn't do as planned or as predicted in theaters, or as hoped for, I guess. I was hopeful that there would be, we'd get another Next Generation series, basically. But obviously that didn't happen. But after Nemesis failed, quote unquote failed, I like Nemesis. Don't misunderstand me. But after Nemesis failed, I never thought I'd see Patrick Stewart playing Captain Picard again. I mean, I could have imagined a scenario where someone would play a young Picard or some crap like this. In fact, I know that idea, I think, basically had been tossed around at certain points at Paramount or CBS, or at the time CBS was owning everything, before they split off, or Viacom, was owning everything. Anyway, all that business shit, that's worth talking about here. But I never thought that this would happen. So it is a small miracle that this is occurring. I think it's important to understand, and really there is a conversation to be had. Now, like I said earlier, we only have one episode so far that I've seen. I know there are people out there who have seen 3 of them, but the 99.9999% of us have not seen those episodes. Okay. Or all of those episodes yet. Again, it's a 10-episode season. We have one episode. I refuse now to gauge a show on one episode. I am cautiously optimistic after seeing one episode of Picard. That might be the most important takeaway here. But something I mentioned earlier, a conversation I kind of wanted to get into, is that because of, not just social media, but because of the interconnectedness, because of the World Wide Web in general, movies aren't just movies anymore. Right? Or TV shows aren't just TV shows anymore. Yes, they are just movies. Yes, they are just TV shows. But it's not just about what you read, say, in an interview and TV Guide that is heavily controlled. It is not... Basically, the World Wide Web has created a Wild West of information about what's really happening in the entertainment industry. And that is, frankly, coloring much of of how we perceive what we watch as television shows or as series or as movies, right? Like, we know a lot of the crap that was going on with Discovery. And so now, it's with Star Wars. We know the crap. Now we know. So there's that leak of what was supposedly Colin Trevorrow's original script, or Trevorrow, for episode 9, right, for Rise of Skywalker. Whether he titled that or not doesn't matter. But we know that there was that leak. Now we know Trevorrow has confirmed that, yes, that was one of, or because there's actually more than one script, I think. He's like, yeah, those are my scripts. And so we have rare occasion where, because of leaks online and all this stuff, where people can post stuff anonymously and you don't have the gatekeepers around information so much, we have rare occasion to see what could have been and to have knowledge of what could have been. And when we find out perhaps how good things could have been, I mean, we don't want to fall into any kind of like grass is greener fallacy, but when you find out what possibly could have been, and some things are genuinely better, it's debatable how they'd be executed, but some things could be genuinely better, it really colors how we enjoy now what actually exists and gets presented in front of us. So we live in a very, very different entertainment landscape than we ever have. And that's a really important point to bring up. I think, as can be clearly seen from season 2 of Discovery, ships, and I don't mean starships, I mean as in like ships as in the production crew of a show, things can change mid-season, where suddenly a whole new writing team or direction team or whatever steps in, and things that get set up at the beginning of a season, totally new ideas get implemented later on in the season than what was originally planned. And when you know that that happened, or when you can sense that that happened, and there's enough ingredients to suggest that this is what went down, that there's, trouble in Hollywood, or trouble in the writer's room or whatever, it creates a negative perception of what you see in the show. Now, I'm not defending Star Trek Discovery for anything. That show is genuinely, regardless of who is running it at any given point, and it seems like we had 3 or 4 different teams over just its 2 seasons, that show's rubbish. Or it ended up being rubbish, because it ended up there was no payoff, went in crazy directions, and especially if you go back, like Ellen and I were watching Star Trek Enterprise again. When you go back and watch Star Trek from the Berman era, the amount of time that characters get to just fucking breathe and have a conversation in a crawl space and everything is amazing. And it's so refreshing to watch stuff that isn't just, trying to emotionally drain you after 40 minutes. And I don't mean like make you feel something. I mean, drain you of any possible feelings that you have left, and so, oh man, Discovery is so bad. To say nothing of the rampant implausibilities and plot holes and everything else within it. I mean, it's just, it's terrible. And Picard as a show, again, this isn't going to be a high, what term do I want to use? Say this isn't going to be like a really in-depth review, because I don't think it's fair. You cannot, no one can honestly do an in-depth review of Picard off of one episode. That's not possible. There was a time where that wasn't true. A pilot is always tricky, like I said earlier on in this episode. Okay? In this episode of Sovryn Tech. But, you can watch an episode of Next Generation back in the day, and you have an idea of what this show is about and whether or not it's a good show. And you would watch it and you go, well, holy shit, this is a great show. I'm going to watch more. With Picard, that's not how it's set up. In fact, it's a bit of a fail, because we know Patrick Stewart came out and said that the show is binge-worthy, but CBS All Access is releasing it 1 episode per week. Obviously, that is to get subscriber numbers, or, get subscribers for CBS All Access. Again, go ahead and torrent it, folks. Really. But let's be clear here. What's going on in Picard, even just in the first episode, is clearly a response to the negative, the totally valid negative responses to Star Trek Discovery. I think that's a fact. Picard's, the existence of the show, because I don't know what it cost to get Patrick Stewart or a lot of these actors back into shape and, doing their thing. Even though for many years, Patrick Stewart has seemed to be, the fountain of youth. He's certainly showing age now, but for a long time, he looked exactly the same. It was amazing. Regardless, I don't know what it cost, but there's no way. This is a gorgeous, visually, this is a stunning show. Absolutely gorgeous. They are sparing no expense on it. There's just no doubt about that. Okay. but bringing in Picard and these other characters, and they spend, it's amazing that, like, how many canon connections, how much time they spend. Like, I mean, you see, like, when, spoiler alerts, folks, you're going to get spoiled here, okay? When you see, like, there's the vault of Picard stuff that Picard goes into, and when you see, like, all the things like Captain Picard Day, there's the banner from that episode of The Next Generation. You see the Calypso, the yacht, for the for the Sovryn class. You see, I think, a model of the 171E. I mean, like, there's so much shit in there. And there's a point in the episode where we get to see, like, the original, or not the original, but the the movie version of the Next Generation communicator. There's so many things that pull back to, or that are directly from the Next Generation or other parts. Even, I mean, with the Romulans, and I love this. I mean, believe me, the canon connections were driving me wild. I really, really appreciated it. But you have the Romulans. You have Romulans with the ridges on their head, like in the Next Generation. Then you have the Romulans with no ridges that basically look like Vulcans, like they did in the original series. That's a nice touch. Of course, you see some of we know later in the season, we're going to see some Romulan ships that look exactly like Romulan bird of prey from the original series. Spoiler alerts again, the Borg cube looks like a Borg cube. Does not really look 25% different or anything like that. It is abundantly clear they are trying to respond to the notion that Discovery did not feel or look like prime timeline Star Trek, and it felt like Kelvin timeline, or felt like whatever. With Picard, they are trying to, there's a course correction here. I think that's why they're bringing in so many actors. That's why they're bringing in Hugh. That's why they're bringing in, 7 of 9, being played by Jerry Ryan. That's why they're bringing in Jonathan Frakes and so on. Because, the fact that you're getting the actual actors that played these characters 20 years ago makes it inarguable of who you're dealing with, right? Like, how many people are like, oh, well, Ethan Peck isn't Spock? Yeah, all right. I mean, I thought, I didn't like the writing and all this, but I thought he did okay. I thought the beard looked stupid, but whatever, okay. There's a lot of this argument about all that. I mean, the people that love Discovery, they were going to love whatever CBS All Access made for Star Trek anyway. So you don't have to worry about pleasing them. So this is an attempt to please the people that didn't like Discovery, the people who say, oh, this isn't, this isn't my Star Trek, this isn't even connected to my Star Trek. You can't really argue that with Picard, because they're bringing in the original actors, no matter how old they are. Okay, so I think that this is really a response to that, because we know now also that CBS has 2 more shows. They already had like 3 lined up. Now there's even 2 more than that are coming down the line. I have comments on those, but we're here to talk about Picard. Now, you see, my point is that we really can't talk about Picard now. We can't talk about series, shows, and movies now without talking about all of the rest of this stuff. Without talking about what is Star Trek Twitter saying about it. What is, blah, blah, blah. Like, now it's all a part of the equation. And frankly, that's really annoying. You don't need it to appreciate what's put on the screen. You don't, but you can't help, if you're interested in this stuff at all, you can't help but notice it. And the what's the word? What's the phrase I want to use here? The two-edged sword with this. Now, I have not watched. They brought in Will Wheaton to do a post show called The Ready Room. I hope this is better than that horseshit that they were doing that was called After Trek or whatever. I think there's also an official Picard podcast now, but you can only listen to that on Spotify. I hope it's something better, but you know what annoys me about this? This is studios, in this case CBS, getting out in front and trying to control the narrative that we were just discussing, where it's what is the business outside of what you are seeing on the screen. And I feel like things like Ready Room and the official Picard podcast are just that. And the idea that anybody listens to those and thinks that they're going to get, I think the concepts alone, in my opinion now, are absolutely boring. And I'll tell you why. there are a lot of, and this part has to do with Star Wars. There are a lot of Star Wars podcasts out there. Now, there is no real official Star Wars podcast, which I actually applaud Disney on. But Star Wars has always been a little better about connecting with its fans, as an industry. I mean, when George Lucas was in charge, certainly letting people make fan films and whatever else, that was great. But it's pretty apparent that, and part of this has to do with the Jedi Council Harloff situation and all that stuff. I think it's pretty apparent that if you are critical, if you're too critical of what the studio is doing, they won't give you the perks, like let you show up at premieres. Like I couldn't believe it. There's a Star Trek site I go to all the time, and I still like it, but it's called TrekCore. And these people get invited to show up and, hey, come to a premiere in the UK and see 3 episodes of Picard, or, whoever. Now, the thing is that those same people won't be too critical, when maybe it needs to be, won't be too critical and won't speak their mind, their real opinion or the real problems that maybe their research has shown them about what's happening, at CBS, or, what's happening on the screen with Star Trek or blah, blah, blah. And so they effectively become just arms of the studios. And so I can't imagine it being in any, like you couldn't peel my ears away from a podcast about what was going on in the writer's room for the past 2 years, what was really going on in the writer's room for the past 2 years in Star Trek Discovery. I would listen to that for the rest of my life, because that had to be just, that has got to be some of the most dramatic, engrossing, insane shit that has ever gone on in the production of a TV series. I would love to hear that. We're never going to get that story. Just like with Star Wars, we're never going to get what happened to Rogue One. We're never going to get that story. Not really. We're never going to get, whatever horseshit's been going on with Star Wars ever since Disney took it over. Because there have got to be amazing, dramatic, crazy, wild stories to be told. We're never going to hear it because the message is being controlled and you're only allowed to be so critical. And if you're not critical enough, you stop getting sponsors, you stop getting to go to premieres, and people somehow think that it's special that you get to go to premieres, and which it's not. You're still just a person. You think you're walking down the red carpet and you're somehow better than other people. Go shit yourself. So, the extraneous stuff does not really interest me. And the people like your George Lucas's and Gene Roddenberry's that could come out and speak some, and level some truth, because the studios can't control them. Mark Hamill, to some degree, I guess, has kind of done this. You're just so rarely going to hear from these people, and these people aren't going to have podcasts, or they're not going to get to host the Ready Room or whatever other, shit show they happen to have. So saying all of that, keeping all of that in perspective as we review, because we will, eventually we will get to the point where we review all 10 episodes of Star Trek Picard, or I'll make side comments about what I thought of the last episode or something like that. All of that said, let's talk about what was on the screen. This first episode, and again, I am saying it cautiously that this is just the first episode, this could all nosedive in no time, was fantastic. It was great. Picard gave a great speech. Picard was Picard. The Romulans were properly mysterious, quite frankly. So much of what was going on in this was brilliant. The connection to B4. I even love the fact that the Daystrom Institute was in Okinawa. I thought that was so cool. Even those references, the amount of references to so many things in canon, the fact that this was totally connected to the 2009 J.J. Abrams Star Trek film, and was great. And even that, this first episode changed my perception of that movie, of the 2009 Star Trek, which is amazing for it to do, because now that we know, and I read the Countdown comic book, which is canon, by the way, of Star Trek Picard. We're only 2 issues deep. 3rd issue comes out this Wednesday, I think, as of this recording. And in that, you're starting to see it. But like finding out that Starfleet basically said, hey, we're not going to help the Romulans. Now, in the 2009 Star Trek film, like, oh, this is why Nero is on a scorched earth policy, why he's destroying Vulcan, why he's going to go destroy Earth, why he's doing all this, because these people, Starfleet fucked everybody. And Starfleet, without question, first and foremost, are Vulcans and humans, right? I mean, sure, they're Tellarites and Andorians too, but I don't know, J.J. Abrams just didn't know that, I guess. And also, we knew that the Narada, which was Nero's ship in the 2009 Star Trek, should we just call that Star Trek 2009? I think that makes sense. In that was partially Borg technology that he used that allowed the Narada, because we know that from the Countdown comic. Now, something, and I didn't look back, and it would have only taken a minute. So the Countdown comic for Picard is canon. There have been Countdown comics, and there was even a Nero comic. As far as I know, all of those were considered canon too. And in fact, the Countdown comic to Star Trek 2009, I'm pretty sure, and this is the only thing that there'd be some kind of contradiction, because that laid out, or maybe it was the Nero comic that laid out that it was Borg technology. No, I think it was Countdown. Anyway, that laid out that I thought Data was in command of the Enterprise. Because in Picard, Data seemingly didn't survive, Data himself, even though they're certainly setting things up to where Data could come back, or at least his memories could in some way. So there'd be a little bit of a contradiction there, but regardless, I mean, I've brought these kind of comments up many times. What gets considered canon, certainly with Star Trek, seems to shift by the day, right? Because Hive by Brandon Braga, which was a Next Generation story that had to do with the end of the Borg, came out like 2000. No, that wasn't 2006. It was later, 2012, something like that. I don't know. They had 7 of 9 in it, and Picard. That was supposed to be canon. I guess it's not anymore, because I don't think that's going to end up happening, and CBS clearly doesn't give a shit about Brandon Braga. To their detriment, I dare I say. But anyway, so regardless of that, this is all setting up very nicely a better understanding of what happens in Star Trek 2009. And I thought that was a great accomplishment in itself. But I really do appreciate, and this reminds me of Tron, with the movie Tron, how the movie Tron Legacy took place 20 years later, and they did it like in real time, just like this takes place 18 years after Star Trek Nemesis. So the amount of time passed is the same as to when you first experienced the story, right? And I applauded that so much, Tron Legacy. In fact, I mean, that's a movie, the Tron movies, that's something I've wanted to, I haven't shared those with Ellen yet. I'm going to get to it. We're going to get to it. But like, I've thought about it when going to engage it, that I'm like, well, can someone like appreciate in the same way the fact that when Tron first came out, and you go so long, you go 20 years without a sequel, like, can you appreciate I mean, like, there's that 20 years of waiting and wanting and imagining, and then finally it actually happens, and there's an appreciation that occurs, similar to what happened here with Picard, that I never thought I'd see this again, just like I never thought I'd see Kevin Flynn again, or Tron again, but then it happens, and you're just, oh my God. And you're just so happy, and it's so unbelievable. But I love that, because you can't buy history like that. You can't. That time has to pass for it to have the same meaning. And I think Star Trek Picard totally delivered on that, at least with the first episode. It absolutely delivered on, okay, it's been 18 years. You got to come out swinging. Just like Tron Legacy did with Tron. And you just feel rewarded for caring and loving, say this character with Picard for so long. And you really do get rewarded for it. So I like that a lot. I don't know how much I really enjoy this idea that Starfleet has seemingly become a nefarious organization. Of course, it appears that with Discovery Season 3, that's kind of where that's how things are going to head, is that the Federation is going to become effectively evil. I don't really know necessarily how I feel about that, but Picard's reaction to it is dynamite. I'm sure this is going to play into a much larger story, as far as all that goes. I am curious to see, I like this idea of synthetics, of androids like Data, that they have been effectively banned, and Picard is saying, now, this does get a little weird. I get a little conspiratorial about this because Star Wars is the same thing. I feel like there's somebody in Hollywood who is terrified of like Rocco's Basilisk, who's terrified that like they're going to get tortured by an AI in the future, because Picard is very clearly pro AI and making it abundantly clear because of the fact that Starfleet won't allow for the development of synthetics, or of like conscious synthetics, I guess. And Star Wars is the same thing, where it has this weird like, oh yeah, we got to treat the droids with respect. And I've talked about that in TIE Fighter Renegades episodes. It's a little weird that message is now worming its way into the other major science fiction franchise, which is Star Trek. So it's fine. It's a great narrative in this case. It's weird in Star Wars. Like, it seems out of place in Star Wars, which is why I noticed it. But in Star Trek, yeah, it fits, and we'll see where this ends up going. I'm very intrigued by that. Now, Star Trek is trying to point at some transhumanist future. Of course, I'm not, or transhumanist as in H+, okay? As in, I'm not going to get into semantics here. You know what I mean by transhumanist. There's an argument to be had around that I'm actually transhumanist as well, but I talked about that on a Q&A a little while back. Anyway, whatever. I mean, it's science fiction, so they're running with it. I thought that was fine. There's just a lot to love in this, and Patrick Stewart is just such a presence. You can't help but enjoy, seeing him as Picard again. And I've checked it out again. Like, I just want to make sure. It's like, okay, was that just like, well, yeah, for the first time, wow, that was really cool. We haven't seen this in so long, so I'm just so glad that it's here. Is it really good? No, it actually ended up being really, really good. It's a very, very solid first episode. As far as pilots go, definitely one of the best Star Trek pilots ever made. Granted, a short one. It only clocked in at about 40 minutes. But, yeah, the music... Jeff Russo's doing the music. I have to listen to the music a little bit more and pay attention to that. It felt a little subdued. There was some nice cues in it. I've heard people write these reviews that somehow the opening theme was the most epic fucking thing they've ever heard. I didn't hear that. Both times that I listened to it, it seemed very subdued. It did not feel like a Star Trek theme, but it wasn't bad. It just didn't, I want like a classic like Star Trek Voyager or something. I don't want them to do another Diane Warren song like for Enterprise, but, not that I minded that so much either. But I wouldn't mind if it was a little more bombastic. But okay, whatever. It's subdued, different tone. Direction was good. All the acting, everything, the character of Daj and her twin sister and all this. All that was really cool. Nice setups. I'm glad that they connected with B4. B4 was part of this. And that they are really picking up where Nemesis left off, and where what we saw in the Star Trek 2009 that was in the prime timeline left off. I'm glad that they're doing that. I'm very, very pleased on that end of things. Again, I'm being cautiously optimistic. I'm very concerned that this still could nosedive completely, but we are more or less guaranteed a second season. We'll see what ends up happening with that. So I could keep going, but I really want to see more before I say a lot more. But this is this is eons better than really what Discovery is in any shape or form. This is necessary for Star Trek. Just like, you could compare it to The Mandalorian, right? Like, so much that's going on in Star Wars. There's so much bullshit happening, but The Mandalorian's not just good. It's fucking awesome. And Picard could be the same way, where there's so much bullshit going on in Star Trek, and there's plenty to talk about. And I don't think Discovery Season 3 is going to be any fucking better. But Picard could be fucking great. Could be. It's off to a great start. I'll give it that. In the comic book, I even enjoyed that. They do have a There is a canon novel coming out in February for Star Trek Picard. I already have the audiobook already pre-ordered. I will definitely be reviewing that. I am interested to hear that. You know, it's funny, actually. I finally got, because the last Discovery book was Dead Endless, I think was the name of it. This is so weird. I finally got to that. That came out in December. I wasn't in it because Discovery just pisses me off so much. And I didn't even get into short treks, but they've all been just a mess lately. I finally got to listening to it, and it's actually a pretty good book. Like, I'm kind of impressed. And I was wondering the whole time, I'm like, wait, when does this book, with this Dead Endless book for Star Trek Discovery, I'm like, when does this book take place? I don't really understand what's going on here. Like, Burnham's the captain of the Discovery, but wouldn't Saru really more be at this point? And Culber's dead, or like, there were things that didn't make any sense. And then finally I found out, or it gets to the point that you find out the whole book, it has, the Culber from Dr. Culber from Discovery in it while he's dead and in the mycelial network, like we know. But this whole book is taking place in literally an alternate dimension, kind of like, or an alternate universe, like the mirror universe, but it's not the mirror universe. So, nor is it the Kelvin timeline, or at least I don't think it's the Kelvin timeline. That'd be interesting if they said it was the Kelvin timeline at the end. I haven't finished listening to the book, but this would, because the Discovery novels, as well as the Picard novels, are considered canon. Other Star Trek novels are not. All of them up until this point have not been canon, except for, again, Discovery and Picard. And I assume any novels around other shows coming out would be the same deal. So now there are at least like 4 or 5 Star Trek universes now, or Star Trek timelines. I would be intrigued to hear what the name of this one is, and what I'm just worried at some point they're going to try and take advantage of that. I think that's fine. I actually like it, and I think there's something to take advantage of there. But I'm more worried that CBS is going to want to take advantage of it, and we're just going to run into a fucking mess with all of it. But regardless, I like what they're doing with Picard. It's not saving Star Trek yet. But after 10 episodes, it's got a chance for me to really save Star Trek. We'll see. Anyway, so do check it out. I give it frankly, for an opening episode, I give it a 10 out of 10. I didn't really like the theme, but it's not that it was bad. It's just it didn't meet my own personal taste. So I'm not going to knock a point off for that at all. Everything that it set up, I dug. I didn't so much like that there was a news network, whatever. Those are narrative choices, and fine. And I get why they did it, and it helps out moving, or with laying out the narrative that we're in the year 2399. So, which is the year that this takes place. I think it's 2399. Anyway, I dig it. 10 out of 10. Check it out. It might fall apart in the next episode, but I'm going to guess that it's not going to. So we'll leave it with that, and that is it for this week's Sovryn Tech. Wrap this baby up. Make sure you go to check out all of our sponsors. Of course, if you need to find them, they are in the show notes. And go to zombie1.com, and you can get access to thousands of hours of other exclusive content. You're going to want to hear that Q&A that Ellen and I did. It was dynamite time. So sign up for that. But we'll end this one off here. I will see you next week. I will see all of you on the other side.
Thank you for listening to Sovryn Tech, an Osiris One production. Now go out there and make some trouble.